The early dun-coloured sun decants like weak tea through my window. Outside, all is love, like a Madonna's smile. Reality dissolving, slow images resolving on our own bed of pain. All of us, our hopes and fears, are born again.
He wanted to be a painter, a poet and a musician, and I think he achieved all those. We're going to Gride, to Liv's cottage, and it's a lovely cottage and we love going there. And it's a lovely drive up. And when Llewellyn was here, Bob used to sometimes walk up to get the cattle out of the way so we could get through. Oh, it's just quite a tricky drive. All these sharp bends and rocks sticking out. And here we are, Gride. How about that? We used to stay at MYFANWY Kitchen's cottage, which was lovely. And Bob did a lot of painting round there at Dolgestlai and all round that area, at Cadaridris. But Bob always painted no matter where he was. He just couldn't stop. It was something he did non-stop. There was always a pad in the car. He kept a pad in the car that he used. And sketch all day long, and when we got home at night while I was getting a meal, he would be making them into watercolours. He just did it non-stop. He could not stop.
He was a natural painter. He was a born painter. There was nothing which he had been taught. I think that was it mostly. He had a very good sense of tone and colour, and he obviously loved his subject matter.
Bob did win a scholarship to the Stoke-on-Trent College of Art, but as he was a sickly child, his mother thought he might be sick on the bus, even though he was about 17 at the time, so he didn't go. He said, to quote his own words, if he had gone, he would probably have wound up working in one of the pottery factories, painting roses on chamber pots. So he thought perhaps he'd done the best thing.
The main thing about his work was that he really did love the world around him. He loved the sky, and he loved the sea, and he loved the cottages, and he loved the slate fences. And that was dominant. That is totally different to what goes on today. Because in the past, the subject very much dominated the picture. And Bob was a man who loved the subject, and he put it down with tremendous humility. And I don't think he was ever really very pleased with what he painted. I have a feeling he painted it, he had to get it off his mind, but he didn't say, that's jolly good, I like that. He wasn't that sort of person.
He was a painter of great sensitivity, although his physical onslaught of paint onto the canvas was pretty vigorous, but there was a great sensitivity within that. And I think a lot of his pictures, when you actually view the site, are a distillation, rather like Cézanne, of what one actually sees.
When he was a boy, his father was a postman and used to take him out on his van. And he used to love the scenery, and he used to go out all weathers, and the scenery in Staffordshire was very, very grand and very dramatic. It was wonderful. He loved it.
Godlike and slow I move among my paints. The shapes with which I lately strove mock me from the canvas. A serenity to match the mood of nature's theme evades my colour. Such unholiness of form, violent perplexity of hue, bespeak of barrenness within. The soul too, you see, has its October days.
His pictures are sensuous. They're romantic. He loves dark skies and shafts of bright light and things. They're very much part of him, I think. Certainly the handling of the paint, I'm sure. He being a generous person, he did use rich paint. He loved the quality of rich paint. It's a very interesting thing, I think, about the quality of paint. You can usually tell the character of an artist by his paint.
He would take unusual grounds to the painting and try things which suddenly brilliant purples beneath slate quarry paintings which actually were almost monochromatic when he finished them. But if you looked very carefully, and you can see it on this one, if you come just into this piece, there's quite a strong red in between the greys, and that's the underpainting. The underpainting occurs and occasionally shows through between slabs of paint, and that's very much a Bob trait. If you were out to forge a Bob Dawson, you'd need to understand the underpainting that went on. And the underpainting, even in these earlier pictures, which appear quite dark, have very brilliant colours beneath them.
The colour was always good. I don't think you could ever fail his colour. When you went to a room and there was a painting by Bob, the first thing you would not say is, what lovely colour. His colour was right.
He had a natural sense of tone and of colour and of drawing. And those are the things which made his work so good, both in his sketches, his watercolour, and in his oil painting.
Well, this particular painting is at Lask Edge, which is in the Cheshire, Staffordshire borders, and it's a high edge of rock with large protrusions of rock through it. It was an area which Bob thought was almost Welsh in its qualities, and it's an area which has tremendous weather changes, and this drama of the weather is very typical, and anyone who lives or knows this area would say, yeah, that's the sky at Lask Edge. And throughout the area there are stone walls, and this is an area which other painters like Jack Simcock, Arthur Berry and other Staffordshire artists painted. This area is always a dramatic skyscape. And the optimism in these later paintings, and you can usually tell when Bob has moved on a little bit, because the signature, this one is the midstream signature, which has the full name in red. And then as we go from this period to a more optimistic period, it becomes RD and a strong, bright accent within pictures, with jewel-like qualities of colour. You'd find a window or a doorway and put a jewel-like colour in these cerulean blues and brilliant cobalts. As soon as he found the elements in a landscape, these hard, strong shapes of cottages, he was happy. And so I think once he went to Wales, that gave him great pleasure. You know, the slate walls, a very uncompromising landscape. He seemed to be attracted to landscapes that required great human ingenuity to survive in.
I think it was a certain simplicity about Wales. The Welsh cottage was not something which showed off. He never showed off. And I think he liked things which were absolutely basic and natural. And all the little lanes he painted and roads and stone walls and things, they were all created naturally, not for effect.
He loved the grandeur of it, I suppose. He loved the colours. He painted in quite a limited palette at times. He loved them. He just loved the scenery. It wasn't unlike Staffordshire, really.
This painting has this brilliant glow within it, and aspects of paint which out of context look strange, but once they're placed within, the warm glow is to the activity, the cattle, warmth, the farmhouse, and he's very subtle in linking a colour here, the farm door relates, and his paintings very often have complex relationships between one area and another, which to the casual observer are not always obvious. Bob was not an obvious painter. He painted strong subject matter, but with lots of subtle and interesting nuances.
He would keep a little sketchbook in the car, and it was full of figures and boys on bicycles and ladies with shopping bags and anything that happened to go by. He did like drawing figures, but they didn't seem to fit in with his landscapes. Bob liked painting cows because they did things with their bodies, funny things. They twist their bodies. If you watch cows, you'll see they're doing weird things. He didn't like sheep because they were just bundles of fur.
It always reminded me of one of Holbein's portraits of one of the Tudor kings. He had that sort of build and that kind of a face.
He was a big man. He seemed to fill the landscape. Whenever you talked to him, he took up a great deal of space.
Physically, he was a huge man. He could have been a prop forward in a rugby team.
Big and tall and lovely. No, he wasn't what you'd call the handsome hero. No, he wasn't. But he was a lovely man.
Oh, this is interesting. Became professional saxophone player in the years of the big bands. Remember the big bands? And use the itinerant nature of the living to give myself a good art education. So this is how Bob really sums himself up. There's the whole life history there in about 3 inches.
I suppose the first time I met Bob, there was this junior character with a alto saxophone and in one hand and a canvas in the other, so I thought we're fellow spirits.
I first met Bob when I joined the Leslie Douglas Orchestra. We were going to Germany, but first we did a BBC audition, and Bob always seemed to be there near me. If somebody took my coat, it was Bob. And well, when you go to Germany, if you take the fare of somebody else and you've got a car, that covers the expense of the car. So Bob was going to take the tenor player with him, but the tenor player let him down. So he asked me if I would like to go with him. So I travelled to Germany in Bob's old Volkswagen. We just worked in the same band, and we found we could talk to each other. We were 2 lonely people, really, that hadn't found anybody before that we could talk to and share things. So that's how we met. Then we thought, it would be nice if we got married. So we went to Frankfurt, and the British consul married us. So that's how it all started.
Practically every artist I've ever known, proper artist, were interested in music and played some instrument. This very big man, he was a big man, and the saxophone It's rather sort of humorous sort of vision.
His improvisation was great. But it was connected to the original theme. It was an embellishment of the theme. And it never wandered too far away. You could always hear the theme behind it. But the improvisation was fresh, interesting, adventurous.
Bob picked up this saxophone that he'd never seen in his life before and played. And then I realized what a musician he was, because he was playing this instrument and it was in a different sort of category.
Bob was being one of the best lead altos on the dance band scene, the big band scene, and that is the highest compliment in a sense you can play any saxophone player, to be a good player and lead a section.
That was me.
I've got a photo here. I'm hidden behind Ken Griffiths, the band leader, but Bob is visible, so that's all that matters. There's Bob. Have you got him? Bob and I were keen on the new music called Bob. And Mum used to get an American magazine called Downbeat. It came across an advertisement in there, wanted any records by Louis Armstrong, willing to swap. We can get plenty of Louis Armstrong in England. We used to send them over there, and we got these rarities, all sorts of conditions and recordings of Charlie Parker. And we used to, well, Bob, this is the sort of musician he was. He used to take down from the record the tunes, and if anybody knows Parker, some of the tunes are not very easy. And he could play them, and he could play them, well, we both played them, but the solos Bob played were better than mine, and in the bop idiom, which in that, they hadn't heard of it in the potteries. So these two hicks from the Sticks in Leek were playing this music which was current in America at the time. I was very surprised when he gave up music, actually. To this day, I don't know really why, he's perhaps looking ahead, but I know he liked children, but I definitely thought it was nearly a sin that he didn't continue with his music. It always made me sad.
Bob gave up music because of the sort of music was being played. Well, I don't know what they called it then, the sort of things, the Beatles and all that. He said it was like playing Morse code. He was lead alto in a sax section. He liked to play music. He didn't like to play pop stuff. That wasn't his thing. But he always wanted to be a teacher. And then I heard that somewhere on the radio that they were recruiting older people as teachers. So I told him about it, and so he applied and he was taken on. So he became a teacher.
Bob's classrooms, it was just like opening a gate into a beautiful garden. The walls were plastered with fresh, childlike things, you know, just done with great enthusiasm. And there we are, as a big child teaching a lot of little children, and they're all jointly involved in this. I would have thought it must have been a wonderful, like a experiment, you know, an adventure.
He loved giving. He loved the children, and he knew what he was there for was to help the children, but he could discipline them as well. And his painting, well, he just went into his garret when he came home, and he'd get on with his painting when Peggy was making the dinner. And I went to his studio. I mustn't call it a garret, but it was crammed full of paintings, hundreds of paintings. and it was a place where he could just be himself, let himself go. It didn't matter, it didn't have to be tidy. Paintings were strewn around on the tabletops. He had boxes and boxes of pictures, drawings. His brushes were all around, a smell of turpentine. Paintings stacked up against the wall. It was just a lovely hideaway. And he used to go there every night after school, straight up there. And then Peggy would call him down for his dinner when it was ready.
When you give up teaching, invariably artists blossom when they give up teaching. I've known artists in Wales who have done that. They've been teaching 5 days a week, and it stopped them painting. As soon as they retired, their work has improved immensely.
Pastel colours were creeping in, and the dark blackness was disappearing. And I think this was probably because he'd been able to retire, and he didn't have the stresses and strains of teaching, which was a great strain, especially on a sensitive artist.
I often wonder how the hell Bob coped. But again we come back to Peggy, and she understood and kept him going a bit longer.
If anybody wanted to exhibit his work, he'd say, I haven't got anything, but he had. He'd got hundreds of beautiful paintings. He just didn't like, I suppose, exposing himself to people like that. He was just being an artist, I suppose, being a sensitive man.
I think that we've suffered from an age of self-publicists and those who depend on Saatchi and Saatchi for their image rather than their content, that we've rather been led by the nose into believing certain things are good, and the paintings, I think, will in reverse. Those which are now heavily publicised will fade, and those which are not will increase in value.
A lot of the art critics, myself included, I wrote for The Guardian for over 12 years, we only wrote about modern art. And the artists who were carrying on in what was then considered the traditional way were not exactly forgotten, but purposely overlooked.
He's the last person to go around saying what a good artist I am. And he never aimed high. His aim was to paint good pictures. He wasn't ambitious in any way, except ambitious to paint better. And he's one of those people who today, I'm afraid, are rather rare, these painter lovers of the world around them, because the students in art schools, they're not taught to love anything, they're not taught to draw, and the only way to show your love of something is to put it down. If you can't draw, it must be very frustrating. It means really, basically, you don't love anything. And they're not encouraged to look around, use their eyes and love things. Today, it all has to come from inside the head, new ideas and things like that. Bob was perfectly content just to paint the world around him. He really did love the world. It was a sort of religion, I think. And it's wonderful for me that he loved Wales so much, because we had the benefit of his pictures.
He loved skies. If he saw a lovely sky, he'd say, nice one, God, thank you, God, and throw his arms in the air and dance. He was a big man, but he danced. It was lovely to watch.
Bob's quality of work and the manner in which he painted, and technically how he painted, if untrained he be, which I don't believe, Bob always worked with very sound methodology, and his paintings will remain, and they will be unchanging, because the pigments he used and the way he placed them on and the grounds that he included and spent a lot of time preparing, well, I think stand these in very good stead in time to come.
He had many ways of doing pictures. They could be delicate. He did a lot of work with tissue paper and collage. He would do watercolours. He did pen and ink drawing. And he did big, bold paintings with oils and a palette knife. He varied a lot. He was just I suppose the mood how he saw the thing he wanted to do. As I say, it's like taking a chorus on something. You hear the tune and you think how you can interpret it. And that's how he did his painting.
You're just too marvelous for words, like glorious, glamorous, and that old standby, amorous. It's all too wonderful. I'll never find the words that say enough, tell enough. I mean, they're just not swell enough. You're much, and just too very, very to ever be in Webster's dictionary. And so I'm borrowing a love song from the birds to tell them that you're marvelous, too marvelous for words.
In case all the power and the painful warning leave me again, I must paint quickly. Much I have to do now, the trick is mine. All those years to clear off all those broken images and dirty colour I was using to show the world how beautiful I thought it was. Maudlin, eager, drunk as I was on you, loved you better than a mother. I see you now for real, and full my brush can register at last.